This is lesson 3-8, finding and estimating square roots. The square root is the number a is the square root of b if a squared equals b. Essentially what they're saying here is the square root of 16 is 4. We need two numbers that are exactly identical that will multiply together to get 16. And those numbers would be 4 times 4. So that's what a square root is. The principal square root is the positive square root. If I ask you for the square root of 16, the principal square root is 4. Every square root always has two square roots, a negative and a positive, because negative 4 times negative 4 equals positive 16 as well. But negative 4 is not the principal square root. The principal square root is always the positive square root. The negative square root of a number is the number in the form of a negative and then a square root symbol. For example, if I do this, that means I want the square root of 16, I want the opposite of the square root of 16. It's a negative square root, which is negative 4. If you try to put that negative sign underneath the square root and then take it on your calculator, most likely your calculator will tell you you have an error, because there's no two numbers that are identical that you can multiply together that will give you a negative number. The radicand is the expression underneath the radical sign. So we have this 14x cubed. All of this is what we call the radicand. Sometimes a square root will be referred to as a radical. A radical is anything underneath any type of root, a square root, a cube root, a fourth root, whatever. I refer to them as radicals periodically as well. Just get used to the fact that a radical means it has some sort of a root, either a square root or a cube root, etc. Perfect squares are squares of integers. Okay? Like 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. So the square root of 1 is a perfect square, the square root of 4 is a perfect square. Okay? If it's a square root, the square of an integer is what we call a perfect square. If we're going to find and estimate square roots, it's not difficult to find and estimate square roots, because you just need to look at them and say, okay, what do I do? If you don't already know some of your square roots because you just know them, then you need to put them in your calculator and you need to understand how you find your square root key. If you don't know how to find the square root key of your particular calculator, then please come see me and I will be more than happy to show you. Each calculator is a little different, so it may be difficult for some of you to find that square root key. But you're looking most likely for this key right here. Sometimes the key will look like this. It's still a square root key. All right, if I want to find two numbers that multiply together to get 25, I know that that's 5, so this would be plus and minus 5. It's not asking me for the principal square root, so I'm going to give both. Okay? This one clearly says, problem number 2 clearly says it wants both the positive and negative. So here, I'm basically going to look at this and say, oh, the square root of 9/25. That's really hard to do, but one thing you should know is in the square roots, you can simplify this so that it looks like this. Separately, the square root of 9 over the square root of 25. The square root of 9 is 3, the square root of 25 is 5. It asks for both of them, so it's plus and minus 3/5. Number 3 is specifically asking you for the negative square root of 64. So this is going to be negative 8. Number 4, again, we have a fraction, and you can rewrite this as the square root of 1 over the square root of 16. The square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 16 is 4. So it's 1/4. Last but not least, we look at the square root of negative 49. There are no two numbers that I can multiply together that are exactly identical that will give me negative 49. If I multiply two negative numbers together, I get a positive 49. If I multiply two positive numbers together, I get a negative 49. The only way to get, actually a positive 49, the only way to get a negative 49 is to have one number that's positive and one number that's negative, but that doesn't work for a square root because the numbers must be identical. Therefore, for the real number system, this is undefined. Notice I said for the real number system. So this is undefined in the real number system. There is such a thing as the imaginary number system, which you will get to in Algebra 2, and they will address this problem there. Okay. Now, all of these numbers above us, except for with the exception of number 5, were all rational numbers. Square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of 64 is 8. Square root of 16 is 4. Those are all rational numbers, terminating decimals. Some square roots are irrational. A square root is rational if it's a whole number or a terminating or repeating decimal. It's irrational if the root is a decimal that continues without repeating. So what we need to do is we need to be able to determine whether each expression is rational or irrational. We look at plus and minus the square root of 144. I happen to know that 12 squared is 144, so I have plus and minus 12 here. That's a whole number, not a decimal, not a fraction, but it doesn't matter. It's a terminating or repeating decimal, so this is a rational square root because it's a rational number. 12 is a rational number. Negative square root of 1/5. We can rewrite this as the square root of 1 over the square root of 5. This would be 1, but the square root of 5 is some weird decimal. Okay? If you took the square root of 5 on your calculator, you're going to get 0.23, I got 0.2236, and it keeps going. Since the number keeps going, this is what we consider to be an irrational number. This is an irrational number. If I actually divided it, it adds up to be negative 0.44721, So it's an irrational square root because it's not a terminating or repeating decimal. So it's irrational. Negative 6.25. Well, if I put negative 6.25 on my calculator, I get negative 2.5. Negative 2.5 is a terminating decimal, so this would be rational. Number 4 over here, I get the square root of square root of 1/9, which is the square root of 1 over the square root of 9. The square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 9 is 3. 1/3 is a rational number, so this is rational. Remember, as long as it's a terminating decimal or a repeating decimal, it is a rational number. Okay? A terminating decimal can be a whole number because it terminates. The squares of integers are called perfect squares, and you can estimate square roots by using perfect squares. Let's pretend you don't have your calculator. Okay, so you don't have your calculator, and you need to know between what two consecutive integers is negative square root of 105. Well, start to think of things. Okay? If I thought of something, I go, okay, 9 squared is 81, 10 squared is 100, 11 squared is 121. 105 is between 100 and 121. So I now know that my number has to be between 10 and 11. And since it's negative, it has to be between negative 10 and negative 11. So that's the two consecutive integers in which negative square root of 105 lies. Because it lies between the square root of 100 and the square root of 121. Between two consecutive integers does 28.34 lie. And you might go, oh man, it's a decimal. How am I supposed to do that? Well, think of this. 5 squared is 25. 6 squared is 36. 28.34 is somewhere between those, closer to 5 squared than it is to 6 squared. So it's going to be 5 point something. So the two integers which it's between is between 5 and 6. Not hard to figure out estimating square roots without using your calculator. All right, now, to find your approximate value of square roots on your calculator, again, you need to know how to use your calculator. If for some reason you cannot figure out how to use the square root key, please come and ask me individually. I will be more than happy to show you how to use the square root key on your calculator. So let's go back to 28.34, which I said was going to be some closer to 5 than 6, remember? Because 28 is closer to 25 than it is to 36. To figure this out, I'm just going to simply put in the square root of 28.34. Some of your calculators you can put in just square root, then 28.34. Some of your calculators you have to put in 28.34 and then take the square root of it. Know your calculator. If you can't figure it out and you don't have the instruction manual to your calculator, ask me and I'll be more than happy to show you. So if I'm supposed to find 28.34, I plug that into my calculator and I get 5.323532662. It ends only because I run out of digits on my calculator. Nearest hundredth means tenths. Here's the hundredths position. So I go to the right of the hundredths position. It's less than 5. So everything after the 2 goes away, and I just leave it at 2, so this is 5.32. Approximately 17.81. Again, I'll stick this in my calculator, 17.81. And I will get 4.220189569 to the nearest hundred. There's the hundredths position. If I go to the right, it's less than 5. So all of these will go away. And this is approximately equal to 4.22. Learn how to use your calculator. Make sure you know how to round. Otherwise, you're going to be a little embarrassed about trying to find your square roots.